Jada Brooks had always believed in one simple rule: stay under the radar. Keep your head down, do the work, and stay invisible. At least, that's how she survived at her old school, where everyone knew their place. But now, standing in Jefferson Academy's pristine classroom, everything she thought she knew was about to change in a way she never could have imagined. The air was thick with the sound of scratching pencils and whispered gossip. It was supposed to be a simple math class, just another day, right? But today wasn't like any other day. Miss Brooks, the voice of Mr. Whitmore, the towering, self-assured math teacher, broke through the hum of the room like a clap of thunder. Would you care to solve this equation on the board? Jada's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't even raised her hand. She wasn't even looking at him. She was sitting quietly, trying to fade into the background, just like she always did. But here she was, in the middle of a room full of students, suddenly the center of attention. The eyes of her classmates felt like lasers as they turned to stare at her. Jada's palms grew clammy, but she tried not to let it show. She glanced at the equation he had just written on the board. Her stomach tightened. It was a beast of an equation, an intimidating combination of algebraic terms, square roots, and fractions that looked like it had crawled out of an advanced calculus textbook. Most of the students in the room were looking at it with a mixture of fear and confusion. Even the ones who normally aced their math tests were squinting at the problem like it was some kind of puzzle they'd never seen before. But Jada didn't feel fear. Not exactly. She felt something else. Recognition. It wasn't that the problem was easy, it wasn't, but it felt familiar. As though she had seen something like it before. Maybe not the exact numbers, but the structure, the way the variables and constants interacted, it felt right. Jada's gaze shifted to Mr. Whitmore, who was watching her with a mixture of amusement and expectation. It was clear from the smug smirk on his face that he didn't think she could solve it. She was the new girl from the South Side, after all. The girl who didn't belong in this high-class school. I'll give it a try, Jada said, surprising even herself with the calmness in her voice. The class fell silent. Jada stood, walking up to the front of the room as if she were walking into a storm. She could feel the weight of their stares. The room was filled with whispers, some curious, others skeptical. She took the piece of chalk, feeling its cool weight in her hand, and turned toward the board. Her fingers hovered over the surface, but then she took a deep breath, her mind already calculating. She started writing. At first, it was slow, careful. Step by step, Jada began working through the equation. The chalk moved smoothly in her hand, making clean lines as she simplified the terms. She adjusted, rearranged, and broke the problem down into smaller parts. Every move felt natural. Like she was following a familiar rhythm. In the back of the room, there were whispers. This is crazy. She can't actually be doing this. Isn't that the new girl from the South Side? Yeah, but she's not even in the honors math program. How is she doing that? Jada didn't pay attention to them. She just focused on the equation in front of her. Piece by piece, the numbers and symbols began to make sense, falling into place as if they were meant to be together. She wasn't just solving the problem, she was dancing with it, each step fluid and certain. The more she worked, the more her confidence grew. She could feel the tension in the room shift, a sense of disbelief hanging in the air. The other students were still staring, some with their mouths slightly open. Mr. Whitmore, arms crossed in front of him, hadn't moved. He hadn't said a word since he told her to solve it. Finally, after what felt like both an eternity and just a moment, Jada stepped back from the board. Her solution was complete. The equation had been solved, perfectly. She turned to face the class, waiting for the inevitable snickers, the sarcastic remarks. But none came. Instead, there was silence. Mr. Whitmore's eyes narrowed, scanning the solution Jada had written. He didn't say anything for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, he spoke. This problem, he began, his voice calm but firm, was a problem from a national mathematics competition. A problem designed to stump even the best students. He paused, looking at the class. I didn't expect anyone, especially someone from this class, to solve it. A beat passed. Then, he turned to Jada. Where did you learn to do this? Jada's stomach churned, but she kept her voice steady. I just worked it out. It makes sense. Whitmore stared at her, an expression of disbelief flickering across his face before it was quickly replaced by skepticism. You worked it out. Interesting. The class was still silent. Some students glanced at each other, unsure of what to make of this. Others were clearly impressed. Jada could feel their eyes on her, but none of them had the courage to say what they were all thinking. How did she do that? Return to your seat, Miss Brooks, Mr. Whitmore said curtly. Jada nodded and walked back to her seat, her heart pounding in her chest. As she sat down, she glanced over at the other students. They weren't laughing. They weren't mocking her. But the whispers had started. She could hear them clearly now. She actually solved it. No way. That's insane. How did she even? But it wasn't just the students who were talking. Emily Carter, a girl who always sat in the front row with her perfect posture and perfect hair, leaned over to Jada. Wow, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. That was impressive. Really impressive. Jada blinked, unsure of what to say. Emily was the kind of girl who didn't normally give compliments, let alone speak to people like Jada. But there it was, that unexpected praise. Thanks, Jada muttered, still trying to process what had just happened. As the bell rang and the students began to file out of the classroom, Jada gathered her things slowly, her mind racing. The looks, the whispers, the surprise, she hadn't expected any of it. She wasn't sure what it all meant, but one thing was clear, things had just changed. In the span of a few minutes, she had gone from being the quiet, unnoticed girl in the back of the room to someone people were going to pay attention to. And somehow, that terrified her. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jada couldn't sleep that night. Her mind was buzzing, too much had happened too quickly. She had gone from the quiet, unnoticed girl at the back of the classroom to the one everyone was whispering about. It didn't feel real. It was as though she'd stepped into someone else's life, one where people saw her for what she could do instead of who she was. The glow of her small desk lamp cast a soft light over her worn notebook, its pages filled with half-finished problems and neat, precise solutions. She glanced at the equation she'd solved earlier in class, still fresh in her mind. It hadn't been hard for her, not really. She had done the work before, perhaps in different forms, perhaps not with the exact numbers, but it had felt like home. Still, the way Mr. Whitmore looked at her, like she was some kind of anomaly, stuck in her thoughts. The way the room had gone silent when she finished. And Emily Carter, the girl who had barely said 2 words to her before, now giving her an unexpected compliment. It was all so strange. But more than that, it was unsettling. Jada had learned one thing in life, people always saw her for where she came from, not who she was. And she had learned to embrace that. She wasn't supposed to be seen. She wasn't supposed to stand out. In Southside Chicago, you didn't get to be anything other than invisible if you wanted to survive. Growing up, it had been her mother, Gloria Brooks, who taught her that. Gloria was a woman who had made a life for herself out of nothing, who had fought tooth and nail to raise Jada in a world that didn't seem to care. And in Southside, survival meant keeping your head low and not drawing attention to yourself. Jada's mind drifted back to those quiet nights in their cramped apartment, the two of them huddled together around a small kitchen table with a single, flickering light. Gloria would work double shifts at the local diner, leaving Jada to figure out her homework alone. And when Gloria came home, tired and worn from a long day, she would always say the same thing. You do what you need to do, Jada. Stay quiet, stay sharp, and keep your head low. The world's big, baby, but it doesn't care about us. The world doesn't care about people like us. Jada had learned to internalize that. She kept her head low. She worked hard. And she didn't dare hope for anything more. The idea that someone might look at her as more than just the girl from Southside, the girl with the scholarship who didn't really belong here, that was a new, unsettling thought. The next day at school, the whispers followed her. They swirled in the hallways, echoed in the locker rooms, and buzzed around the cafeteria. Everyone had seen what happened in Mr. Whitmore's class. Everyone had watched as she solved an equation meant to stump even the smartest students in the room. But no one dared to ask her directly. Instead, they spoke in half-jokes, unsure whether they were impressed or confused. Jada, right, a girl from her math class, one of the cheerleaders, asked cautiously as Jada sat alone at lunch. Her name was Sarah, though Jada couldn't remember if they'd ever spoken before. Yeah, Jada replied, her voice low, unsure of what Sarah wanted. I saw you do that thing in class, Sarah said, her words trailing off. You're, like, really good at math, huh? Jada stiffened. I guess. I mean, you just solved it, Sarah added, as if Jada hadn't heard the hushed awe in the room when she did. I'm just surprised. I thought. Well, you don't really look like someone who could solve something like that. Jada kept her gaze down at her lunch, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sandwich. She had learned a long time ago not to take offense. People didn't mean to be cruel, they just didn't understand. They didn't understand what it was like to be the only black girl in a room full of people who had never seen someone like her, someone from a background like hers, be good at anything, let alone math. Yeah, I guess you could say I'm good at math, Jada said, her voice flat. She didn't want to explain herself. She didn't want to talk about how she spent every night after school solving problems to escape the noise of the world outside. She didn't want to explain how math had been her refuge, the one thing that never judged her, the one thing that always made sense. I think it's awesome, Sarah said, almost too quickly. She smiled awkwardly, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. You should definitely join the math club or something. You'd probably be, like, amazing at it. Jada's heart skipped a beat. A math club. Her. The girl who had spent years learning how to hide in plain sight. The girl who had always been told that people like her didn't belong in places like this. The idea of joining a club that might force her to stand out was terrifying. Thanks, but I'm good, Jada replied, forcing a smile she didn't feel. I'm just here to get through. The words tasted bitter as they left her mouth, but they were true. She wasn't here to make friends. She wasn't here to be noticed. She was here for one reason and one reason only, to get out. The bell rang, and the room quickly emptied. As she gathered her things and prepared to head to her next class, Jada felt a hand on her shoulder. Hey. She turned around to find Emily Carter standing there, her expression serious. Emily had been quiet during lunch, watching from the corner of the cafeteria as Jada interacted with Sarah. Now, she seemed like she wanted to say something more. I just wanted to say, don't listen to them, Emily said quietly, glancing around at the other students who were leaving. They don't get it. But I do. And I think you're something special. Jada felt her breath catch in her throat. Emily wasn't just the perfect, popular girl from the front row of class, she was someone who rarely spoke to people like Jada. Her words felt genuine, but they also felt like they came with an expectation that Jada didn't know how to meet. I don't need anyone to understand, Jada replied softly, the weight of her words sinking in. I'm just here to make it out. Emily nodded, a faint, knowing smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. I get it. But sometimes, we need a little more than just getting out. We need to be seen for who we are, not just where we come from. Jada said nothing. She didn't know what to say. And part of her wasn't sure if she ever would. The next few days at Jefferson Academy felt like a blur for Jada. It wasn't that she hadn't been able to focus, it was that everything felt too much. The whispers, the stares, the sudden attention she was receiving from people she had never even spoken to, it was all overwhelming. And each day that passed only seemed to heighten the pressure. It wasn't just in the hallways. It was in every classroom she walked into, every glance sent her way. Jada could feel it, thick in the air, curiosity, judgment, awe. They couldn't decide which one it was, but she felt them watching. Even Mr. Whitmore seemed different since the day she solved that equation. He looked at her as if he was studying her, as if trying to figure out how a girl like her could do something like that. Jada tried her best to ignore it all, to focus on the work. She wasn't here to make friends or to become a science project for her classmates to poke and prod at. She was here for one reason, to get her scholarship, get the grades, and then go. Anywhere but here. Anywhere where she wasn't constantly reminded that she didn't belong. But the weight of their eyes was hard to ignore, especially when it came from people like Emily Carter. Every day, Emily would find an excuse to talk to her. She'd ask about the math problems Jada had solved, or about her day in general, her tone always friendly, yet Jada couldn't shake the feeling that Emily was trying to learn more than she let on. And while Jada had learned a long time ago to stay cautious of others, she couldn't help but feel a pull to Emily, a curiosity of her own. That was the problem. She didn't want to feel curious about someone like Emily, someone who had a perfect life, a perfect smile, and a perfect family, but she couldn't help it. Emily was different from the others. She didn't treat Jada like she was some sort of curiosity or project. One afternoon, Emily caught up with her after math class, just before the bell rang. "Jada, wait up," she called, rushing to meet her by the door. Jada turned around, her stomach twisting with the familiar knot of tension she had been feeling lately. She gave Emily a tight smile. "What's up?" "I wanted to ask," Emily started, looking a little uncertain. "Would you consider joining the math club? I know you're not into standing out, but I think you'd be really great in it. You could teach us a thing or two, and we could learn from you." Jada raised an eyebrow, unsure of what to make of the offer. She wasn't a fan of the spotlight, and she didn't particularly enjoy the idea of having more eyes on her. But Emily's sincerity, the way she genuinely seemed to want her there, threw Jada off guard. "I'm not really a math club type of person," Jada said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm just here to finish my studies. I'm not here to make waves, you know." Emily's expression softened, though she didn't press further. "All right. Just thought I'd ask." As Jada walked away, she felt a strange heaviness in her chest. She didn't belong here. She didn't belong anywhere like this. She didn't want to be the girl who solved the equation, she wanted to be nothing. Just one more face in a crowd. The next day, though, things took a turn she hadn't expected. It was during lunch when she saw it. The small group of students who had been watching her every move for the past few days, standing in the corner of the cafeteria, their heads bent low in conversation. As Jada grabbed her tray and made her way to her usual seat, she overheard snippets of their words, loud enough for her to catch every one of them. "She really thinks she's some kind of genius, huh? I bet she can't even handle a basic test. I've seen her in class, and she's got no clue. She's probably just faking it. Trying to get attention." The words felt like daggers. Jada's heart raced, but she kept her head down, ignoring the comments, choosing to pretend they didn't exist. But they followed her. Everywhere she went, those words echoed in her mind, poisoning the confidence she had found in her math abilities. For a brief moment, she felt the desire to lash out, to prove them wrong. But she knew better. She had learned long ago that fighting back only gave people more ammunition to use against you. So she kept walking. She took a seat at a table in the far corner of the cafeteria, away from everyone. The sounds of laughter and conversation from the rest of the room felt muffled, distant, as if she were separated from them by an invisible barrier. And yet, it wasn't just the students who were part of the problem. Mr. Whitmore had become something of a constant presence in her thoughts. After their exchange in class, he had been more distant, like he was trying to figure her out. He had given her assignments that were more challenging than what the rest of the class was working on. She had figured out his game. He was testing her, trying to see if she really was as good as she seemed. He didn't think she belonged at Jefferson Academy. That was clear. He had given her an opportunity to show her talents, to impress the class, but he never fully acknowledged it. He hadn't said a word to her outside of class, not even a single word of encouragement. It was almost as if he resented her being there. The pressure kept building. With every passing day, Jada felt like she was drowning under expectations she never asked for. The weight of her hidden talent, the scrutiny from her peers, the pressure to perform, it was too much. Her phone buzzed on the lunch table, breaking her train of thought. She glanced at the screen and saw a message from her mother, Gloria. "How's everything going at school? Remember, you don't owe anyone an explanation. Do your best, and keep moving forward. You got this, baby girl." Jada smiled softly at the message, feeling the familiar warmth in her chest. Her mom always knew how to encourage her when everything felt overwhelming. Gloria had been her rock, the one person who made sure Jada stayed grounded, reminding her that no matter how hard things got, she could handle it. Still, even her mother's words couldn't ease the pressure building inside her. Jada sighed, pushing her phone back into her bag, as she turned her attention to the students around her. They were still watching her. Still judging her. She could feel their eyes. And she hated it. Jada didn't know how much longer she could handle this. She wasn't sure if she was ready for the challenge, for the way everyone suddenly seemed to expect something from her. She wasn't sure how much more of this she could take before she cracked. Jada didn't expect the phone call that came late on Thursday evening. Her mother had already gone to bed, exhausted from another long day at work, and Jada was alone in the dimly lit living room, staring at the scattered pages of her math textbook. She had spent hours working through problems, trying to force her mind to focus, but the weight of everything, school, expectations, the pressure to fit in, was wearing her thin. Her phone buzzed again on the coffee table, the screen lighting up with an unfamiliar number. At first, she hesitated. It was past 9 p.m., and no one she knew ever called this late. But something told her to pick up. "Hello." She answered, her voice tentative. "Jada?" The voice on the other end was clear, but a bit nervous. It was Emily Carter. Jada froze for a moment. She had expected something like this eventually, but not now, not like this. She quickly recovered, forcing her voice to sound neutral. "Yeah, this is Jada. What's up?" I hope I'm not bothering you," Emily said, clearly hesitant. I wanted to check in with you. I've been thinking about what you said the other day, about not being interested in the math club. And I get it, I really do. But I also know you're really talented at math. And I think you'd be a good fit, Jada. I think you could do something really special if you just gave it a chance." Jada's chest tightened. Of all the people in the world, why was Emily Carter reaching out to her? The girl who always had a perfect life, perfect grades, and perfect friends. Jada didn't know what to say, and the silence on the other end stretched for longer than it should have. "Look, I know it's not easy. But, we have a math competition coming up next month, and we've been looking for someone who could really help us, someone who can bring something new to the table," Emily continued, sounding more confident now. "We've got some good people on the team, but I don't know. I just think you could really make a difference, Jada. We could use your brain, if you're willing." Jada blinked, the words slowly sinking in. You want me to join your math competition team? Yeah. I mean, you don't have to decide right now or anything. But if you're interested, I could talk to Mr. Whitmore about getting you on board. It's just an idea, but I think it could be good for you. The offer felt surreal, like she was living in someone else's world. The math competition was an elite event. It was the kind of thing only the best of the best participated in, the top students from the top schools. Jada had never thought about herself that way, elite, or the best. But here was Emily, offering her a chance to be part of that world. For a moment, Jada hesitated. The part of her that had learned to stay invisible, that had been taught never to rise above her station, screamed at her to turn down the invitation. No, it told her. Stay out of the spotlight. Keep your head low. You don't belong there. But another part of her, the part she'd buried for so long, the part that was tired of being invisible, tired of feeling like she didn't matter, whispered something else. Maybe this was her chance. Maybe this was her opportunity to finally be seen for something she was good at, something she deserved. Jada swallowed. I'll think about it. Of course, Emily said, her voice softening. Just think about it, okay? You don't have to make any decisions now. Just know that the offer's there. They said their goodbyes, and Jada hung up the phone, the weight of the conversation still pressing on her chest. She sat in silence for a long moment, staring at her reflection in the dark window. The girl she saw staring back at her didn't look like someone who belonged in a competition like that. She looked like the girl who sat in the back of the classroom, the girl who kept to herself, the girl who didn't cause trouble or stir up attention. But for the first time in a long time, Jada felt a spark of something, hope, maybe. Or fear. Either way, it was there, and it was real. The next day at school, Jada couldn't shake the phone call from her mind. She found herself avoiding Emily all day, unsure of how to handle the offer. It wasn't like she hadn't had her fair share of chances before. People had always told her she was smart, that she had potential. But she had never believed them, never let them get too close. She had been conditioned to believe that someone like her, someone from Southside Chicago, someone who didn't have the privilege of fancy tutors and prep schools, didn't belong in spaces like this. She didn't belong in a math competition. But Emily's words kept playing in her head. You could really make a difference. Was that true? Was there something in her that was worth seeing? Something more than just the girl who came from a broken home, a girl who had always stayed in the shadows. The girl who kept quiet, who kept to herself, who never let anyone get too close. That afternoon, during her free period, Jada sat in the back of the library, her math textbook open in front of her. She couldn't focus on the numbers in front of her. They blurred together, like everything else in her life lately. Instead, she found herself thinking back to that moment in class, the moment when she had solved the equation that no one else could. She remembered how it felt, the rush of satisfaction that had surged through her, the way the room had gone silent, everyone looking at her like she was something extraordinary. But she didn't feel extraordinary. Not when she went home every night to the same tired apartment, not when she watched her mother struggle to make ends meet. Not when she knew that no matter what she did, no matter how much she achieved, she'd always be viewed as the girl from the wrong side of the tracks. Jada, what's up? A voice broke her from her thoughts. Jada looked up to see Emily standing beside her, holding a stack of books in her arms, her usual smile in place. I've been thinking, Jada said quietly, her hands trembling slightly as she closed her textbook. About your offer. About the competition. I don't know, if I'm cut out for something like that. Emily raised an eyebrow, her expression softening. You're more than cut out for it, Jada. You don't need to be scared of standing out. You've got something that most people here don't have, true talent. And if you join the team, it's not about being the best. It's about pushing yourself, about proving to yourself that you're capable of more than you think. Jada took a deep breath, her mind racing. Emily was right. Maybe she had been too afraid to believe in herself. Maybe she had been hiding from the very thing that could change her life. "Okay," Jada said, her voice steady. "I'll join." The decision was made. But even as Jada agreed to join the team, she knew it was only the beginning. What would it mean for her? Would she finally be seen for who she really was, or would she just prove to everyone that she didn't belong? She didn't know the answer. But she was about to find out. The following weeks passed in a blur for Jada. The weight of her decision to join the math team weighed heavily on her every step, but there was something about it, something both exhilarating and terrifying, that she couldn't shake. Every morning, as she walked through the school doors, she was aware of the silent eyes following her. It wasn't just the students anymore, it was the teachers, the coaches, the mentors, all of them watching her closely. Expecting something. Jada kept her head down, as she always had. She focused on the problems they assigned her, doing them quietly and efficiently. But every day, the expectation from the team, and from herself, grew. Her skills, which had always been something she kept hidden, now felt like a burden. She wasn't just solving equations anymore, she was carrying the hopes of an entire team. Mr. Whitmore had noticed. He had been the one to give her the hardest problems to solve, the ones that were meant for the brightest students, the ones that made her feel like an imposter. She wasn't supposed to be the best. She wasn't supposed to stand out. But every time she looked at the math problems, every time she tackled a new challenge, she realized just how much she could do. How much she had been hiding from the world, and from herself. Still, she wasn't ready to fully accept it. It was hard. It was hard to believe that she was more than the girl from the wrong side of town. The girl who wasn't supposed to be at Jefferson Academy in the first place. How could she be something more than that? How could she be the person everyone was starting to believe she was? Her mind raced as she walked into the math club meeting on a Wednesday afternoon. The moment she entered, the room fell quiet. It wasn't the normal, friendly silence. It was a tense one, as if everyone was waiting for something, waiting for her. "Jada." Emily called from the front of the room, her smile bright, but there was something about her expression that made Jada uneasy. "We're just getting started. Glad you could join us." Jada nodded, forcing a smile of her own as she made her way to the table where the other students were gathered. She had come to appreciate Emily's kindness, but something in the back of her mind kept telling her that she was only being looked at for what she could do. The pressure was building, and it felt like it was suffocating her. Mr. Whitmore had told them that they would be doing mock problems today, preparing for the upcoming competition, but Jada wasn't sure she was ready for the intensity. The room buzzed with excitement, but all Jada could hear was her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She wasn't sure she was ready for the responsibility that came with being a part of this team. Not only did she have to prove to everyone around her that she was capable, but she had to prove it to herself. Emily handed her a piece of paper, a set of advanced algebraic problems that made Jada's stomach tighten. They were difficult, even for her. She scanned the first one, her mind already racing with the potential for failure. She tried to steady her breath, focusing on the problem in front of her. But then, something unexpected happened. "Come on, Jada," Emily said with a teasing smile. "You're the genius here. Show us what you've got." Jada's breath caught in her throat. The word stung in a way she hadn't expected. It wasn't the compliment that bothered her, it was the weight behind it. The expectation. Everyone was looking at her now. They were all waiting for her to prove them right. But what if she couldn't? What if she wasn't good enough? She hesitated for a moment before grabbing the pen and starting on the first equation, her hand moving automatically as if it had a life of its own. Her mind raced, solving the equations in her head faster than she could write them down. The numbers flowed through her like a current, the logic snapping into place like pieces of a puzzle. Her pulse quickened, but it wasn't out of fear anymore, it was out of focus, out of determination. And then, before she knew it, the last equation was solved. She placed the pen down, the weight of the room settling around her. Jada looked up and saw the eyes of her teammates fixed on her, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. "Wow," one of the other team members, Carlos, said in disbelief. "That was incredible." Emily leaned forward, a proud smile stretching across her face. "I told you," she said, her voice low but full of admiration. "You're amazing." Jada couldn't breathe. She wanted to be proud of herself. She should be proud. But instead, all she could feel was the pressure building once again. They were expecting her to be this perfect, to solve everything with ease. But she knew better. No one was perfect. Not even her. And yet, there they were, waiting for her to carry them to victory. Mr. Whitmore, who had been watching from the doorway, finally stepped into the room. His expression was unreadable, but there was a small flicker of approval in his eyes. "Nice work, Jada," he said quietly. "You've got a gift." But his words didn't soothe her. They made her feel like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, one misstep away from falling. There was no room for error. No room for mistakes. If she failed, it wouldn't just be her failure, it would be the team's failure. And they were counting on her. As the meeting wrapped up, Jada couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had solved the problem, sure. But what had she really proven? Was she just the girl with a math brain, or was she someone with a real chance to make something of herself? And why did it feel like all these people were asking more of her than she was ready to give? She left the meeting in a daze, her thoughts swirling. She had never felt so exposed in her life. The math had been easy, she was used to that. But the weight of their expectations, the way they looked at her like she was some kind of miracle, was crushing. It felt like they didn't see her anymore. They saw a machine, a tool they could use to win a competition, to prove something. And the worst part? She was starting to wonder if they were right. Maybe she was something more than just a girl from Southside Chicago. Maybe she was the genius they all thought she was. But if that was true, what would happen to the person she had always been? The quiet, reserved girl who just wanted to get by. Would she lose herself in this new identity, in the world they were pushing her into? Jada didn't know the answers. She didn't know if she could handle this. But one thing was certain, she had crossed a line. There was no going back now. The days following the mock problem session felt like a blur to Jada. Every glance from her classmates, every word of praise from her math team, felt like a weight pressing down on her shoulders. She couldn't escape the truth, they saw her as something she wasn't ready to be. More than a girl from the wrong side of town. More than the girl who tried to keep a low profile. She was now expected to be the best. To be their solution. As the team continued to prepare for the upcoming math competition, Jada felt a growing sense of dread. There was no turning back now. She was part of the team, and she had to show up. She had to prove that she belonged. And the worst part? She wasn't sure she did. She had always been good at math, no doubt about that. But this was different. This was not just about solving equations for herself. This was about proving her worth to a team, to a group of people who were depending on her to help them win. The pressure was relentless. It was a chilly Monday morning when the first real test arrived. The competition was only a few weeks away, and Mr. Whitmore had announced that they would be participating in a school-wide qualifying test to determine who would represent Jefferson Academy at the regional competition. This was it. The first hurdle. The math team was filled with a mix of excitement and anxiety as they filed into the testing room. Jada took a seat at the back, her stomach a tight knot of nerves. The test was scheduled for an hour, and she knew it was going to be the most important hour of her life. As the test papers were handed out, Jada scanned the problems. They were tough. Really tough. It wasn't the kind of math she had been doing on her own in the privacy of her room, where she could solve problems at her own pace and take breaks whenever she needed to. No, this was different. This was timed, competitive, and, most importantly, it was an open declaration that everyone was watching her now. She tried to steady her breath, but her hands shook as she picked up the pen. She had to focus. She had to prove that she belonged. She couldn't afford to mess this up. The first problem was a complex algebraic equation, one that would normally take her a few minutes to solve. But today, her mind was clouded with doubt. She stared at the numbers, the symbols, the formulas, and nothing came. Her mind went blank, as if the math had suddenly become a foreign language. Jada forced herself to take a deep breath. Come on, she told herself. You've done this 100 times. You can do this. But the more she stared at the problem, the more the clock on the wall seemed to tick louder, mocking her inability to focus. She glanced up briefly and saw Emily, sitting a few rows ahead, writing furiously, her pen moving with perfect confidence. The other members of the team, too, looked like they were in their element. And then there was Jada. Paralyzed by the weight of expectation, unsure of her ability to handle the pressure. She tried again. She scribbled out some numbers, made some attempts at simplifying the equation, but everything felt wrong. She was losing time. The second problem came, a geometry question, and Jada was sure she knew how to solve it. Yet, as she read the question, it felt like she was looking at it for the first time. Her mind refused to make the connections. Focus. Focus, Jada. She could feel the sweat starting to bead on her forehead. The room felt hotter, smaller, suffocating. It wasn't the test that was getting to her, it was the knowledge that she had to get this right. That her future on the team depended on it. That everything she had worked for, everything she had fought for, was at risk in this one moment. Time was slipping away, and she still hadn't solved a single problem completely. Jada's heart began to race. She could hear her breath coming in shallow gasps. She felt trapped, as though there was no way out of this suffocating spiral of doubt and fear. The buzzer sounded, signaling the end of the test. Jada barely registered the sound. She looked down at the blank spaces on her paper, the scribbles and incomplete equations mocking her. Her hands shook as she handed in the test paper, feeling like a complete failure. Don't worry, Jada, Emily said quietly as she walked past her, offering a reassuring smile. You did great. You'll see. But Jada couldn't shake the feeling that she had just let everyone down. Her own teammates, Mr. Whitmore, even herself, she had failed them. She had failed her own expectations. Her gift for math seemed like a curse now, one she wasn't sure she could handle. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Jada couldn't concentrate on her classes, couldn't focus on anything except the test. What if she wasn't good enough? What if all those people who had believed in her, Emily, Mr. Whitmore, even Carlos, were wrong? What if this whole idea of her being some kind of mathematical genius was just an illusion, a fantasy she had convinced herself of? That night, she sat alone in her room, her math book open in front of her, but her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't look at the numbers, couldn't make sense of the problems. She felt like she was drowning in them. She stared out the window, the city lights twinkling in the distance, and wondered if she could go back to the way things were before. Before math competitions. Before people saw her as the genius. Before she had to shoulder the weight of other people's expectations. The phone rang again, breaking her reverie. It was Emily. Hey, Emily said, her voice bright and easy, as though nothing had changed. I just wanted to check in. How are you doing? How do you think the test went? Jada hesitated. The last thing she wanted was to talk about the test. But Emily's concern was palpable, and Jada couldn't bring herself to lie. I don't know, Jada admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I think I messed up. Jada, no, Emily said quickly. Don't be so hard on yourself. This is a big deal, and yeah, it's tough. But you're going to be fine. I know you are. We all have those moments, even when we think we don't. Jada felt the tears well up in her eyes, but she fought them back. She couldn't let anyone see her like this. Not Emily. Not anyone. I'm not so sure anymore, Jada said softly. Listen to me, Emily replied firmly. You're not going to give up. You're not. You've got what it takes. You just need to believe it. We believe it. Don't let one test define you. This is just the beginning. You've got this, Jada. Jada held the phone tightly, a knot in her throat. Emily's words were meant to comfort her, but they only highlighted the enormity of the pressure she was under. She wasn't sure she could handle it. She wasn't sure she wanted to. But as the conversation ended and Jada sat in silence, one thing became clear: she couldn't back down now. She had come this far. She had to keep going. She didn't know how. But she would figure it out. The days after the qualifying test were filled with a mix of dread and anticipation. Jada tried to focus on school, on her assignments, but her thoughts were consumed by the test results. She had barely slept the night after the test, replaying each question over and over in her mind. What if she had missed something? What if she had blown her chance? By the time Friday rolled around, the announcement was finally made. Mr. Whitmore had decided to hold a meeting in the school auditorium to reveal who would be representing Jefferson Academy at the regional competition. Jada had been told the results would be posted after school, but there was no escaping the tension hanging in the air. She could feel it as soon as she stepped foot onto the campus. Everyone was buzzing with excitement. But for Jada, it felt more like a storm brewing on the horizon. She arrived early, taking a seat in the back of the auditorium. The rest of the team filtered in one by one, their faces a mix of excitement, nerves, and quiet determination. Emily waved at her from the front, a smile spreading across her face, but Jada could barely bring herself to return the gesture. Her stomach was a tight ball of anxiety. When Mr. Whitmore finally stepped onto the stage, a hush fell over the room. He smiled, his usual calm demeanor taking over as he adjusted the microphone. Good afternoon, everyone, he began, his voice smooth and controlled. I want to thank you all for your dedication this year. The competition will be a tough one, and I'm proud of the effort all of you have put in. Jada tried to focus on his words, but her mind was still elsewhere. She was too focused on the possible outcomes. The truth was, she had no idea what was going to happen next. She didn't know if she had passed the qualifying test. She didn't know if she had done enough. Mr. Whitmore continued, oblivious to the growing tension in the room. So, after much consideration, I'm happy to announce that the following students will represent us at the regional competition. Jada's breath hitched in her throat, and she felt her palms begin to sweat. The names began to roll off Mr. Whitmore's lips, one by one: Carlos, Emily, Megan, and then he paused. There was a moment of silence that felt like an eternity. Jada's heart hammered in her chest, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the whole room seemed to hold its breath. And last, but certainly not least, Mr. Whitmore said, Jada. Jada blinked, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Her name echoed in the room, and for a moment, she thought it might be a mistake. But there it was, Jada, called out as one of the team's official representatives. The shock that rippled through her was immediate, a mix of disbelief and fear. The room burst into applause. Jada heard Emily's excited voice calling her name, but it sounded distant, muffled. The reality of it was overwhelming. She had made it. She was on the team. But why didn't it feel like victory? She stood up slowly, almost in a daze, as everyone congratulated her, but it felt like the walls were closing in. Was this really what she wanted? To be the center of attention, to bear the weight of other people's expectations? Was this the path she had chosen? The meeting broke up soon after the announcement, and the team members began to gather their things. Emily was already at her side, grinning from ear to ear. I knew you had it in you. Emily said, pulling Jada into a hug. I knew you would make it. Jada didn't respond immediately. She wasn't sure how she felt, not exactly. Her heart was still pounding, her mind racing. Thank you, Jada said softly, the words feeling hollow. Emily stepped back, her expression turning concerned. Are you okay? You don't look like you're celebrating. I'm just thinking, Jada replied, trying to push down the rising sense of panic. She wanted to be happy. She should be happy. But the reality was sinking in. The pressure had just multiplied. Hey, Emily said, her tone gentle but firm. It's okay to be nervous. We're all in this together. You don't have to do it alone. Jada nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed that. She had always been alone in her struggles, hadn't she? Always the girl who stayed in the background, keeping her head down and just doing her best. But now, all of a sudden, she was the center of attention, and it didn't feel like she was in control anymore. The weight of others' expectations, her own self-doubt, it was all building up. As she walked to her locker after the meeting, Jada felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. The world around her seemed to blur. She wanted to be excited. She wanted to feel the rush of accomplishment. But instead, all she felt was a sense of dread. It was like the ground had shifted beneath her feet, and she wasn't sure where she stood anymore. She reached her locker, her fingers trembling as she opened it, trying to push away the overwhelming emotions threatening to consume her. As she grabbed her books, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text message from her mom. I'm so proud of you, baby. I knew you could do it. Jada stared at the message for a long moment. Her mom had always been her biggest cheerleader, and she loved her for it. But even now, there was something unsettling about that message. Something that made her feel like she was in over her head. She typed a quick reply, "Thanks, Mom. I'll talk to you later." But even as she hit send, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to let everyone down. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't sure she could do it. But now, there was no turning back. That night, as Jada lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind raced. She thought about the team, the competition, the expectations that were now placed on her. It felt like an avalanche, and she was trapped in its path. Her heart ached, not just from the weight of the pressure, but from the growing realization that she might not be able to handle it. Was she really ready to be the person they all thought she was? The truth was, Jada wasn't sure. She wasn't sure of anything anymore. But one thing was clear, she was going to have to face it all, whether she was ready or not. The days after Jada's selection for the regional competition passed in a haze of disbelief and pressure. Each morning, as she walked through the school halls, she could feel the weight of her new role settling deeper into her chest. Her classmates, the math team, even her family, all seemed to look at her differently now. They saw her as the chosen one, the prodigy who had saved the team. But every time Jada looked in the mirror, she didn't recognize the girl staring back. The girl who had just been thrust into the spotlight, carrying expectations that felt like an anchor rather than a badge of honor. She had never been the type to seek attention. Her entire life had been built around staying quiet, blending into the background. But now, it seemed like everyone wanted something from her. And the pressure was mounting. The first few team practices after the announcement were grueling. Jada was expected to keep up with the team's fast-paced preparation for the regional competition. Every time they tackled a new set of problems, Jada felt herself falling further behind. She was slipping. She could feel it. Everyone around her seemed so confident, Emily, Carlos, even Megan, who had always been a bit standoffish, everyone was in their element. And Jada? She was pretending to be someone she wasn't. One afternoon, during a particularly intense practice session, Jada found herself zoning out as Mr. Whitmore went over a complicated set of equations on the whiteboard. The other students were taking notes and contributing ideas, but Jada's mind was elsewhere. The anxiety was starting to take over again, just like it had during the qualifying test. She couldn't seem to escape the feeling that she was faking it. That they would all find out she didn't belong here. The room was buzzing with activity as the team worked through problem after problem. Emily called Jada's name, her voice laced with concern. "Jada, are you okay? You're awfully quiet today." Jada snapped out of her trance and forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired." Emily didn't look convinced. "Are you sure? You've been a little off lately." Jada shrugged, avoiding her gaze. She didn't want to burden Emily with her doubts. "I'm fine, really." But the truth was, she wasn't fine. Not at all. She had always been able to figure things out on her own. But now, surrounded by brilliant minds, it was harder than ever to convince herself that she was enough. And it wasn't just the competition that was getting to her, it was everything that came with it. The constant pressure. The eyes that followed her wherever she went. Everyone expected her to be something she wasn't sure she could be. As practice wrapped up, Jada found herself alone in the empty hallway, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the school. She needed some space, a few minutes to breathe. But even then, she couldn't escape the weight of it all. Her mind raced with 1,000 different thoughts, none of them good. What if she couldn't perform under pressure? What if she failed, and everyone saw her for what she really was? A girl who didn't deserve the spotlight. As she reached her locker, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She hesitated before pulling it out, hoping for a distraction. It was a text message from her mom. "How was practice today, baby? I'm so proud of you. Keep pushing forward." Jada stared at the message, her heart sinking. She couldn't tell her mom how she was really feeling. She couldn't admit that she was struggling. Her mom had always been so proud of her, always been her biggest supporter. But what would she think if she knew Jada was doubting herself? What would she say if she found out that Jada was afraid she wasn't cut out for this? Jada typed a quick reply, her fingers trembling slightly as she hit send. "It was good, Mom. I'll tell you all about it later." She closed her locker and leaned against the wall, letting out a deep sigh. The emptiness of the hallway mirrored the emptiness she felt inside. She had worked so hard to get here, to prove herself. But now, standing on the precipice of it all, she was filled with nothing but fear. Jada wasn't sure she could handle the expectations. She wasn't sure she could be the person everyone thought she was. Later that evening, Jada found herself sitting in her room, staring at the pages of her math textbook. The numbers and equations blurred together in front of her eyes. She knew she needed to study. She needed to focus. But it was hard to concentrate when every word in the book seemed to mock her. "You're not enough. You don't belong here." She slammed the book shut, frustration bubbling up inside her. She stood up and paced the room, trying to shake the feeling that was suffocating her. She had to figure this out. She had to pull it together. But the more she tried, the more the weight of it all became unbearable. She wasn't the person they thought she was. She wasn't the math genius. She was just a girl from a broken neighborhood who had been lucky enough to get a chance. And now that she had that chance, she was terrified she would fail. The sound of her phone buzzing again interrupted her thoughts. This time, it was a message from Carlos. "Hey, Jada. We've got some new practice problems for tomorrow. We should go over them together. Let me know when you're free." Carlos had always been kind to her, especially after she joined the team. He'd been the one who first reached out to her when she was still trying to find her place, but now, even his words felt like another weight. Another expectation. She wanted to text back, to tell him she'd meet up. But something inside her held her back. What if she messed up? What if he saw through her facade? She put her phone down, shaking her head, her heart heavy. She had to make a choice. The road she was on had no clear path, no guarantees, no certainty. All she knew was that if she wanted to keep moving forward, she had to face the fear and the doubt that were holding her back. She couldn't let herself sink into this dark hole of self-doubt. But the fear of failing, of letting everyone down, of disappointing herself, was like a storm she couldn't outrun. She knew one thing for sure, the road ahead would be far from easy. But it was the only road she had. The weight of the competition was starting to wear on Jada. Her every step felt heavy, as though she were dragging her feet through an endless fog of doubt. The practice sessions were no easier. In fact, they had become more exhausting. The team was tightening up its preparation for the regional competition, and every day seemed to bring new obstacles. It was clear that they all had high hopes for her, and though Jada tried to give it her all, the constant pressure was beginning to take a toll. The anxiety had become more than just a fleeting feeling. It was now a constant companion, gnawing at her every waking moment. Jada knew she was getting better, at least, she thought she was, but no matter how hard she tried, the progress didn't feel like enough. She kept telling herself that it was a process, that it was okay to struggle. But that voice of self-doubt, that nagging whisper telling her she wasn't good enough, was louder than ever. It drowned out everything else. One afternoon, after yet another grueling practice session, Jada walked out of the school with her head hung low. The day's math problems had felt like mountains she couldn't climb. She'd stayed up late studying the night before, but it hadn't made a difference. The solutions didn't come easily. And now, even the simplest problems felt like impossible puzzles. The more she struggled, the more her frustration grew. Why couldn't she just be like everyone else? As she walked down the hallway, lost in thought, Emily appeared beside her, a concerned look on her face. "Hey, you okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. "You've been kind of quiet lately." Jada forced a smile, trying to push away the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "Yeah, just tired." "You know how it is," she replied, her voice sounding more strained than she intended. Emily didn't look convinced. She walked alongside Jada, her footsteps steady, in contrast to the jittery chaos Jada felt inside. "You sure? Because it seems like you've been carrying a lot lately. I don't want you to burn out." "I'm fine," Jada said, a little too quickly. "Just a lot of pressure with the competition coming up." "I get it," Emily said. "But you don't have to do it all alone, you know." Jada nodded, though she wasn't sure she agreed. It felt like she was alone. Everyone else seemed so confident, so capable, while she was drowning in self-doubt. But Emily's words stuck with her. She didn't have to carry it all alone. Later that evening, as Jada sat at her desk, staring at another set of math problems that felt like they would never end, she realized something. It wasn't just the pressure of the competition that was weighing on her. It was the expectation to be perfect, to never stumble. She had been so focused on meeting everyone's expectations, on proving herself to others, that she had lost sight of the fact that she was allowed to make mistakes. A small part of her knew that it was okay to not always have the answer right away, that failure was a part of the process. But it was hard to embrace that when all she could hear was the voice of her own insecurities telling her she wasn't good enough. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Carlos. "Hey, I know you've been stressed lately. Do you want to go over the practice problems together tomorrow? Maybe we can take a break afterward and just relax for a bit. We've got this." Carlos' message was simple, but it struck a chord with Jada. He had noticed. He understood. And maybe, just maybe, he was right. Maybe they could take a step back and breathe. Maybe she didn't have to be perfect all the time. She quickly typed out a response. "Thanks, Carlos. I think I'd like that. Let's do it." For the first time in days, Jada felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep her going. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way through this. Maybe she didn't have to shoulder the weight of it all alone. Maybe there was more to success than just being perfect. The next morning, Jada met up with Carlos at the school library. It was quiet there, a peaceful refuge from the chaos of her mind. As they sat down to go over the problems, Jada found herself opening up more than she had in a long time. Carlos wasn't just a teammate. He was someone who truly cared, someone who saw her not as the math prodigy everyone else expected her to be, but as a person who was struggling, but still trying. They worked through the problems together, and for the first time in weeks, Jada found herself enjoying the process. It wasn't about the competition anymore. It wasn't about the pressure. It was about the problem in front of her, and the sense of accomplishment that came from solving it, no matter how long it took. As they wrapped up their study session, Carlos smiled. "See? You've got this. You just need to believe in yourself. We all do." Jada felt a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just Carlos' words, though they meant the world to her, it was the realization that she wasn't alone. She had people who believed in her. She had a team. And maybe that was enough. That night, as she sat down to study, Jada felt different. It was subtle, but it was there. She had decided that she would no longer measure her worth by the expectations of others. She would measure it by her own growth, by the effort she put into each challenge, no matter how small. She was allowed to stumble, to fail, to learn. Perfection wasn't the goal. Progress was. As she picked up her pen and began to solve the next set of problems, Jada realized something important. The competition wasn't just a test of her abilities, it was a test of her resilience, her willingness to face fear and doubt, and to keep moving forward, no matter the odds. And for the first time in a long time, Jada felt ready for it. As the days drew closer to the regional competition, Jada found herself caught in the tug-of-war between her fears and her newfound sense of hope. She had made significant progress over the past few weeks. With Carlos' help and the support of her teammates, her understanding of the material was improving. But just when she thought she had it under control, another challenge seemed to arise. The team had entered into an intense practice schedule, and while they had made significant headway, Jada couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. The weight of the upcoming competition pressed down on her chest like an unrelenting storm cloud. The countdown had begun, and as the date of the regional competition neared, it felt like everything was moving at a speed she could hardly keep up with. One particularly stressful afternoon, after a long practice session, Jada found herself walking alone to the school parking lot. Her mind was a whirlwind of numbers, equations, and deadlines, but even more than that, she felt an overwhelming sense of inadequacy creeping back into her thoughts. She had spent so many years hiding her true potential, that now that it was being recognized, she wasn't sure she could live up to the expectations everyone had for her. As she reached the car, she could feel her hands shaking. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. She had come so far, but would it be enough? Could she actually perform when it mattered most? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her from her thoughts. It was a text from her mom. "I'm so proud of you, Jada. Keep pushing. You've got this." Jada smiled weakly. It was the same message her mom had been sending her every day since she had joined the team, and though the words were meant to encourage her, they only served to remind her of the pressure she was under. Her mom's belief in her was unwavering, and while Jada was grateful for the support, it also made her feel like she couldn't afford to disappoint her. She felt a tap on her shoulder. Turning around, she was surprised to see Emily standing there, her brow furrowed in concern. "Jada, are you okay?" Emily asked, her voice softer than usual. Jada tried to smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yeah, just a little tired, that's all." Emily didn't buy it. "Jada, you've been distant lately. I know the pressure is getting to you, but you don't have to carry it all on your own. You have a team." Jada's throat tightened. "It's not that simple, Em. What if I can't do this? What if I let everyone down?" Emily's face softened, and she stepped closer. You're not alone in this, Jada. We're a team. We win together, we lose together. But it's not just about the competition. It's about how you grow, how you push yourself. You're already doing so much more than you think. Jada stared at her friend, her chest tightening. Emily's words pierced through her armor of doubt. She realized that she had been carrying this burden alone, pushing people away because she didn't want to admit how scared she was. But maybe it was time to change that. Maybe it was time to allow herself to trust. Thanks, Emily, Jada said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what I'd do without you. Emily smiled, her eyes warm with understanding. We've got your back, Jada. Always. For the first time in weeks, Jada allowed herself to feel the weight of that support. The truth was, she didn't have to do this alone. She didn't have to carry the expectations of others like a burden on her shoulders. Her team, her friends, and her family were all behind her, and it was okay to lean on them when she needed to. That evening, as she sat at her desk working through problems for the final time before the competition, Jada felt a strange sense of peace. The anxiety that had plagued her for so long had not vanished, but it no longer felt all-consuming. She knew there would be obstacles ahead, but she also knew she was not alone in facing them. She could face the pressure, the fear, the doubt, because she was no longer fighting it in isolation. She had a team, and together, they would face whatever came next. She glanced down at the set of practice problems she had been working through, and a realization struck her. All along, she had been focusing on the end goal, the competition, the pressure, the fear of failure. But what she had neglected was the journey itself. Each problem she solved, each small victory, was a step toward her growth, not just as a competitor, but as a person. It wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about winning at all costs. It was about doing her best and learning from every experience, every failure, and every triumph. She could feel the weight of the fear lifting, piece by piece, as she took each challenge one step at a time. The competition was still looming, but it no longer felt like an insurmountable mountain. It felt like an opportunity. An opportunity to prove not just to everyone else, but to herself, that she was capable of more than she had ever believed. And, most importantly, that she was enough, exactly as she was. The day of the competition arrived faster than Jada had anticipated. She stood in front of the mirror that morning, adjusting her team shirt, the same one she had worn for every practice, every meeting. It was a small gesture, but one that grounded her. As she fixed her hair, she took a deep breath and steadied herself. She was ready. She wasn't sure what would happen at the competition. She didn't know if they would win or lose, or if she would fall flat on her face in front of everyone. But in that moment, she realized something important. She had already won. She had proven to herself that she was capable. That she was worthy of this challenge. And that, above all, she didn't have to carry the burden of fear and self-doubt anymore. With one last deep breath, she grabbed her bag and headed out the door, ready to face whatever came next. The day of the regional competition arrived faster than Jada had anticipated, and she couldn't help but feel a rush of nerves. The excitement in the air was palpable as the bus rolled toward the competition venue, a sprawling conference center filled with teams from across the region. The walls of the venue were lined with banners, each displaying a different school logo. It was everything Jada had imagined. The stage was set for what could be the most important day of her academic life so far. The whole team was buzzing with energy, but underneath the surface, Jada felt a quiet tension. She had spent months preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, she couldn't shake the familiar feeling of doubt. Was she ready? Could she truly live up to the expectations everyone had placed on her, both her teammates and herself? What if she failed? Carlos, noticing her unease, nudged her shoulder lightly. Hey, you all right? Jada forced a smile, though it was small and somewhat strained. Yeah, just, the usual jitters. Carlos raised an eyebrow, a playful glint in his eyes. You're Jada, the genius. Jitters don't stand a chance. Her heart lightened slightly at his words, but the pressure still felt like an invisible weight on her shoulders. She didn't feel like a genius, not today. Today, she felt like someone who was just trying to make it through, to do her best, to not let everyone down. But as the team disembarked from the bus and entered the competition area, something strange happened. Jada looked around at the other teams, all of them whispering and preparing, just like her own team. She saw the same nervous glances, the same anxious energy. Suddenly, the thought struck her, every single person here was just like her. They were all here because they loved math, because they wanted to push themselves. And while everyone had their own reasons for competing, one thing was certain, no one was immune to the fear of failure. For the first time, Jada felt a sense of solidarity. She wasn't alone in this. The event began, and the atmosphere was intense. The competition was divided into several rounds, each one more difficult than the last. As the questions flashed on the giant screen at the front of the room, Jada was acutely aware of the ticking clock. Each problem she solved felt like a race against time, but she focused on her breath, grounding herself in the process instead of the outcome. This wasn't about impressing anyone, it was about doing her best, proving to herself that she could face this challenge with confidence. The first round went smoothly, and Jada found herself in a rhythm. She solved the problems one by one, her mind whirring with the familiar equations, her fingers scribbling down the answers without hesitation. Her teammates exchanged encouraging looks as she finished each problem, but Jada was more focused than ever. For the first time, she wasn't just solving problems for a grade or to impress anyone. She was doing it for herself. By the time the third round rolled around, the difficulty level had intensified. The problems were more complex, requiring a deep understanding of advanced mathematical concepts. Jada's heart rate picked up as she read the first problem. It looked familiar, but the variables were different, and the equations were more complicated. Her hand trembled slightly as she began to write. Focus, she told herself. One problem at a time. One step at a time. But the clock was ticking, and every passing second felt like an eternity. Jada could feel the weight of time pressing in on her as the numbers on the screen blurred together. Her mind started to race, panic bubbling up inside her as the tension mounted. She quickly glanced around the room, catching sight of her teammates. Emily was looking at her with a reassuring smile, her eyes filled with trust. Carlos was mouthing something, his lips forming the words, "You've got this." In that moment, Jada realized something. She wasn't alone. She had a team, she had friends, and she had her own inner strength. She had the skills, the preparation, and the knowledge. But more importantly, she had the belief that she could face whatever came her way. Her hand steadied. She closed her eyes for just a second, taking a deep breath, and then returned to the problem. Step by step, she worked through the equations, slowing down just enough to ensure every move was deliberate. The answer didn't come immediately, but it came. When the buzzer sounded, signaling the end of the round, Jada felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. It wasn't that she had solved every problem perfectly, it was that she had faced the pressure and come through it. She had done her best, and that was all she could do. The final round was fast approaching, and the tension in the room was palpable. This was the ultimate test, the moment when everything they had worked for would be put to the test. As they entered the final stretch, Jada couldn't help but think back to everything that had brought her here. The countless hours of studying, the struggles, the doubts, and the small victories. She had come a long way from the girl who had once doubted her worth, afraid to even speak up in class. Today, she was standing at the precipice of something much bigger than a math competition. She was standing at the precipice of her own personal growth. Carlos gave her one last encouraging smile before they all took their seats for the final round. The questions appeared, more complex than any they had encountered so far. The clock started counting down, and Jada's mind went into overdrive. She solved the first question with ease, the second one a little slower, but still with precision. As the clock wound down, the final problem appeared on the screen, and Jada felt her heart skip a beat. It was the hardest question she had ever seen. The variables were unfamiliar, the process more complicated than anything she had ever done. She glanced at her teammates, who were all working furiously. It was the same for everyone. Jada closed her eyes again, her breath steadying. She couldn't rush this. She couldn't let the pressure consume her. She had to trust herself. Trust the process. Slowly but surely, she began working through the steps, each one carefully calculated. Time was slipping away, but she wasn't rushing. She was in the zone, focused, determined. With only seconds to spare, Jada wrote down the final answer, her heart racing. The buzzer sounded, signaling the end of the round. Her hands were shaking, but she felt something that she hadn't felt in a long time. A sense of pride. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The competition had ended, and the buzz in the room began to die down as the judges tallied the scores. Jada sat in the corner with her teammates, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and anticipation. The hours spent solving problems, the stress, the rush, it was all culminating in this one moment. The room was filled with hushed conversations, but Jada could barely hear anything. She sat quietly, her hands still trembling slightly from the intensity of the final round. Her thoughts were spinning. Did she do enough? Did her team do enough? What would the results be? Carlos was beside her, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced with a look of seriousness. Emily, too, was quiet, her eyes focused on the front of the room where the announcer was preparing to make the announcement. "Okay, folks," the announcer's voice echoed through the room, "we've tallied the scores, and we'll begin the award ceremony in just a moment. First, a huge thank you to all the teams who participated today. It's clear that there's some serious talent in this room." Jada barely heard the rest of the speech. Her mind was still racing with thoughts of the competition, of the questions that had stumped her, and the ones she had nailed. The emotions from earlier were still fresh, she had pushed herself in ways she hadn't thought possible. But now, as the reality of the results began to settle in, a new fear gripped her. What if they had failed? What if all the hard work wasn't enough? Her hands were clenched tightly in her lap as the announcer started calling out the results. The first few schools that were called were ones she recognized as some of the toughest competitors in the region. Their names were greeted with cheers from their teams, and Jada couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy. They were the ones who were expected to win, the ones with the reputations. And now, the team in third place. The words hung in the air like an eternity. Jada could feel the tension rise as the announcer paused for dramatic effect. "Is Greenfield Academy?" A burst of applause filled the room, and Jada's heart sank just a little. Third place. It was a great achievement, but it wasn't what she had hoped for. Second place goes to Ridgewood High. The applause grew louder, and the students from Ridgewood High stood up, some of them shaking their heads in disbelief. Jada glanced at Carlos and Emily, and she could see the same thoughts mirrored in their eyes. It wasn't them. And first place goes to. The announcer's voice seemed to slow down, as if trying to draw out the moment for maximum effect. Oak Ridge Academy. The room erupted into cheers as the Oak Ridge team stood up, their faces lighting up with joy and pride. Jada clapped politely, but deep down, a sense of disappointment washed over her. They hadn't won. They hadn't even placed. Jada felt a knot form in her stomach. She looked around at her teammates, and their expressions mirrored hers: confusion, frustration, and, most of all, a sense of defeat. But then, something unexpected happened. Carlos, who had been quiet since the results were announced, turned to her with a smile. "Jada, we did it," he said, his voice calm but full of pride. "We made it to the final round. We held our ground. And more than that, we grew as a team. That's what matters. Jada blinked at him, surprised. What do you mean, we didn't win? Carlos shrugged, his grin still wide. Winning isn't just about the trophy. It's about what you take away from the experience. And I've seen you grow more in the last few months than I've ever seen anyone grow in their whole life. You were the key to getting us to the finals, Jada. That's a win. Emily nodded, her usual seriousness replaced by a rare moment of warmth. He's right. Look at how far we've come. We didn't just come here to compete. We came here to prove something to ourselves. Jada felt her throat tighten as she looked at her friends. It wasn't the outcome she had hoped for, but maybe, just maybe, they were right. The journey had meant more than the final result. As she thought about it, she realized that the competition hadn't just tested her mathematical abilities, it had tested her ability to push through her doubts, to trust herself, and to learn that success wasn't defined by one moment or one result. In that moment, standing there with her team, Jada felt a deep sense of pride. She had pushed herself in ways she hadn't thought possible, and that, in itself, was a victory. The competition had given her a new perspective on what success truly meant. It wasn't about being the best at everything, or about winning trophies. It was about growth, about learning, and about being brave enough to show up, even when the odds seemed stacked against you. Jada wasn't the same person who had walked into that competition room hours ago. She had learned more about herself, about her abilities, and about what it meant to be part of something bigger than just herself. The ceremony continued, but Jada didn't hear much of the rest. She was too focused on the realization that, no matter what the final score said, she had already won in ways that mattered more than any trophy ever could. The days following the competition felt like a blur for Jada. The weight of the event, the intensity, and the exhaustion lingered long after the final scores were announced. Even though her team had not won, she couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling that something inside her had shifted. Her teammates' words still echoed in her mind, especially Carlos' reminder, winning isn't just about the trophy. It was late one evening when Jada found herself sitting alone in her room, her math textbook open in front of her, but her mind far away. The world outside the window was dark, with only the soft glow of streetlights illuminating the neighborhood. Her thoughts were scattered, each one pulling her in a different direction. She had always defined herself by her grades, by how others perceived her success. But now, after everything that had happened, she wasn't sure if that was the only measure of her worth anymore. She closed the textbook with a soft thud and pulled her knees up to her chest, staring out at the night sky. The stars were faint, barely visible through the thick layer of city light, but they were there, distant, constant, and ever-present. She had always admired the stars, their steady presence despite the chaos of life on Earth. Maybe that was how she felt now, distant, but still part of something much bigger than herself. I'm not just Jada, the girl who loves math, she thought. I'm Jada, someone capable of more than I ever realized. As the thoughts swirled around in her mind, she felt a sudden surge of clarity. What if the competition wasn't the end? What if it was just the beginning? The next morning, Jada walked into school with a new energy. The competition was behind her now, but it had sparked something inside her, a fire that she couldn't ignore. She didn't want to be defined by her failures, or by the fact that her team hadn't taken home first place. No, she wanted more. She wanted to embrace her potential and push past the limits she had once placed on herself. As she walked through the crowded halls of Oakwood High, Jada noticed the way people looked at her. It wasn't with judgment or expectation anymore, it was with respect. Her peers had seen her in action, solving problems under pressure, thinking on her feet, and facing the toughest challenges with courage. The whispers of admiration weren't loud, but they were there, and for the first time, Jada realized that it wasn't about the accolades, it was about being true to herself. Her math teacher, Mrs. Reynolds, approached her in the hallway after class. Jada, she said, her voice warm yet firm, I've been meaning to talk to you about the competition results. Jada felt her heart skip a beat, unsure of what to expect. I know we didn't win, but we gave it our best. I think we did okay. Mrs. Reynolds smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. You did more than okay, Jada. You showed everyone in that room exactly what you're capable of. You've always had potential, but now you've proven it. And it's not just in math. It's in how you carry yourself, how you push through challenges, how you lift up those around you. That's something not many people can do. Jada felt a lump form in her throat. She had always known Mrs. Reynolds believed in her, but hearing those words from her teacher made everything feel real. She wasn't just the girl who solved math problems. She was the girl who could face adversity and come out stronger on the other side. I've seen that spark in you for a while now, Mrs. Reynolds continued. You've got what it takes to do great things, Jada. But it's up to you to keep that fire burning. The words hit her hard. It's up to you to keep that fire burning. As she walked home from school that day, Jada thought about her teacher's words. It wasn't enough to just be good at math. She had to believe in herself, to keep that spark alive, no matter what the world threw at her. And she realized that the competition wasn't just about proving herself to others, it was about proving herself to herself. That evening, Jada sat down at her desk and opened her math book again. But this time, it wasn't the pressure of competition that drove her, it was something deeper. A sense of purpose. A belief that she could do more than just pass a test or solve a problem. She could innovate. She could challenge herself to think beyond the limits. As she worked through the problems, her thoughts kept drifting back to the competition. She had faced some of the toughest questions of her life there, and while the answers hadn't always come easily, the process had been just as important. The struggle had taught her more than the perfect answers ever could. It had shown her that failure wasn't the end, it was just another part of the learning process. The next few weeks were a blur of studying, self-reflection, and quiet moments of personal growth. Jada started to take on more challenging problems, pushing herself to explore new mathematical concepts outside of what she learned in class. She found herself seeking out books and articles about the history of mathematics, the brilliant minds that had shaped the field, and the discoveries that had changed the world. She wasn't just doing this for grades anymore. She was doing this because she loved it. Because, in her heart, she knew that math was more than just numbers, it was a language, a tool that could be used to understand the world, to solve problems, and to shape the future. Her friends noticed the change in her, too. Carlos and Emily would often stop by her locker after school, and they could see that Jada was different. She wasn't the same girl who had hesitated to speak up, the one who had doubted her worth. She was confident, focused, and determined to push herself further. One day, as they walked out of the school together, Carlos nudged her. You know, Jada, I think you're starting to look like a math wizard. Jada laughed, the sound light and carefree. Maybe, but I'm still just getting started. Emily smiled. We all are. Jada smiled back, a genuine, content smile. She wasn't perfect, and she wasn't finished growing, but she had taken the first step. The spark that had been ignited in the competition was now a steady flame, and it wasn't going out anytime soon. The following months after the competition were both exhilarating and challenging. Jada felt a sense of purpose driving her forward that she had never experienced before. She was no longer just the quiet girl who blended in with the background, but someone who was learning to stand out, to lead, and to make her mark. But with that came new pressures she hadn't anticipated. One afternoon, as Jada walked out of class, she found a piece of paper folded neatly in her locker. It was an invitation to a summer math research program. The paper was thick, official, and bore the logo of a prestigious academic institution. Her heart raced as she read the contents. The program was for talented students interested in exploring advanced topics in mathematics, ranging from theoretical concepts to real-world applications. It was selective, competitive, and exactly the kind of opportunity she had always dreamed of. Jada stood frozen for a moment, the weight of the opportunity settling in. Her mind raced with thoughts. The program was an amazing chance to take her skills to the next level, but it also meant she would have to compete against some of the brightest minds in the country. The very same type of people who had made her feel invisible just a year ago. Am I ready for this? She wondered. What if I don't make it? What if I'm not good enough? The doubts crept in quickly, but something within her resisted them. This wasn't about being perfect, it was about taking a step into the unknown. It was about pushing herself beyond the boundaries she had set for herself and seeing where it took her. The next day at school, Jada couldn't stop thinking about the invitation. Carlos and Emily noticed her distracted mood during lunch. Carlos was the first to ask, "What's on your mind, Jada? You've been quiet today." Jada hesitated before pulling the invitation from her bag. "I got this," she said softly. "It's an invitation to a summer research program for advanced math students. It's a big deal, but I'm not sure if I'm ready for it." Carlos raised an eyebrow, his expression full of surprise. "Are you kidding? You've been crushing it lately. You're definitely ready. If anyone is, it's you." Emily nodded. "You've come so far. This could be the next big step for you. You should at least try." Jada bit her lip. "But what if I don't fit in there? What if everyone else is way ahead of me? I'll just be the girl who doesn't belong." Carlos leaned forward, his usual light-hearted tone now serious. "You've got to stop thinking like that, Jada. You belong wherever you put yourself. And you've already proved that you can handle tough situations. You've got the skills, and you've got the heart. If this is what you want, go for it." Jada looked at Emily, who gave her an encouraging smile. "Carlos is right. This is your chance to push yourself even further. Don't let fear hold you back." The words resonated with Jada. She had spent so much of her life letting fear dictate her choices. Fear of failure. Fear of not measuring up. But she had faced bigger challenges and come out stronger. Why should this be any different? That evening, as Jada sat in her room, she thought long and hard about the invitation. The program was an opportunity that might not come again, and if she didn't take it, she'd never know what could have been. Her hands trembled as she filled out the application form, detailing her academic achievements, goals, and reasons for wanting to participate. It felt surreal. She had always been the underdog, and now, she was applying for something that would push her to be even better. If I do this, Jada thought, I'm not just proving something to others. I'm proving something to myself. She clicked the Submit button on the application, and a wave of relief washed over her. She had taken the step. Now, all she could do was wait. The following weeks passed in a blur. Jada immersed herself in her studies, focusing on the areas that the program would cover. She tackled advanced algebraic equations, explored the concept of mathematical proofs, and studied real-world applications of mathematical theories. Her mind was constantly buzzing with new ideas and concepts that excited her, and she couldn't help but feel more confident with each passing day. But even as she worked hard, doubt still lingered in the back of her mind. The pressure to succeed, to prove that she was worthy of the opportunity, was becoming more intense. She couldn't help but wonder if she was doing enough to stand out among the other applicants. What if they were all better than her? One day, as Jada was finishing up a particularly challenging problem, Mrs. Reynolds stopped by her desk. The teacher had been keeping an eye on Jada's progress ever since the competition, and Jada could see the pride in her eyes as she watched her work. "You're doing great, Jada," Mrs. Reynolds said, her voice calm yet filled with admiration. "I can see how much you've grown. You're ready for whatever comes next." Jada looked up, surprised by the teacher's words. "You really think so?" "I don't just think so. I know so," Mrs. Reynolds replied with a smile. "You've been working hard, and it shows. This research program is a big step, but I believe you can handle it. Just remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about learning, growing, and pushing yourself. Jada nodded, the weight of her teacher's words lifting some of the anxiety that had been building up inside her. It's about learning, growing, and pushing myself. She repeated the words in her mind, letting them settle deep within her. A week later, the letter from the summer math research program arrived. Jada tore open the envelope, her heart pounding in her chest. She scanned the letter quickly, and a smile spread across her face. Accepted. The words seemed to shine off the page, and Jada felt a wave of relief and excitement rush through her. She had made it. She was going to the program. She was going to take the next step in her journey. But even as the excitement washed over her, a new sense of pressure settled in. This was just the beginning. Now, the real work would begin. She wasn't just a high school student anymore. She was about to step into a world where everyone expected her to be great. And the question that had plagued her for so long still lingered. Am I really ready for this? The day Jada received her acceptance letter to the summer math research program felt like a new beginning. It wasn't just a letter, it was a symbol of everything she had worked toward, everything she had believed was possible, even when doubts had clouded her mind. But as the weeks passed and the program's start date grew closer, Jada began to feel a mix of excitement and unease. The opportunity was everything she had wanted, yet it also came with a weight of expectations she wasn't sure she was ready to carry. The first morning of the program arrived quickly. Jada packed her bag the night before, carefully placing her notebooks, calculator, and extra pencils into her backpack. She double-checked the schedule in the email, mentally preparing for the grueling days ahead. It would be a month-long program, intense and challenging, with participants from across the country who had all been handpicked for their skills. Everyone, she was told, would be there to push boundaries and think beyond what they had ever learned before. The bus ride to the university campus where the program was being held felt surreal. Jada's stomach twisted in nervous knots as she looked out the window. She had done well at Oakwood High. But here, among these other students from prestigious schools, students who had probably been excelling in math long before she had even considered it, Jada felt small. She could already imagine the conversations they'd have, the questions they'd ask her, and the inevitable realization that she wasn't quite as skilled as some of them. The thought made her chest tighten. What if I don't belong here? When the bus arrived, Jada followed the other students into the grand, modern building, her heart still racing. The lobby was bustling with activity, groups of students chatting, professors greeting them, and staff members directing everyone to their designated areas. As she walked through the crowd, Jada couldn't help but feel out of place. The other students were confident, some of them even laughing and joking as if they had been here before. One of the program coordinators, a tall woman in a professional-looking blazer, smiled as she spotted Jada and waved her over. You must be Jada. Welcome. I'll show you to your group, she said, her tone warm yet brisk. Jada forced a smile, nodding as she followed the woman down a long corridor. She couldn't help but notice how self-assured the other students were, their heads held high as they exchanged jokes about various colleges and research topics. Jada felt like an outsider, unsure of how she would fit in with this group. She could already feel the pressure building up inside her. When they reached the room, the coordinator opened the door to reveal a group of students who were already gathered around a large table, speaking in quiet tones. They all turned to look at Jada as she entered. The room smelled faintly of coffee and the sharp scent of chalk from the blackboards lining the walls. Everyone, this is Jada, the coordinator introduced her. She'll be working with you on your team project. Jada, this is Anna, Ethan, and Raj. They're all from different parts of the country, but they're all here because they share your passion for math. Jada smiled awkwardly, trying to hide her nervousness. She had never been one to talk much in group settings, especially with strangers, and now she was expected to collaborate with them on challenging research topics. Anna, a tall girl with glasses, smiled warmly. It's nice to meet you, Jada. We've been waiting for you to join us. We've got some interesting stuff lined up for today. Ethan, a lanky guy with a relaxed demeanor, gave her a nod of greeting. Hope you're ready to dive into some deep problems. We've got a lot to work through this week. Raj, who seemed to be the most serious of the group, offered a curt nod. I hope you're prepared for a challenge. It's not going to be easy. Jada felt her anxiety rise again. She wasn't used to being around students who were so confident and serious about their work. The pressure to keep up was mounting, but she refused to let it show. She sat down at the table, trying to shake off the feeling that she didn't belong. The first task they were assigned was to analyze a complex mathematical proof related to the theory of prime numbers. As the others immediately began discussing the approach they would take, Jada tried to follow along, her mind racing to process the information. She had read about prime numbers before, but she had never been asked to apply such a complicated theory to a real-world scenario. Anna began explaining her thought process, and Jada listened intently. The concepts were advanced, far beyond what she had learned in high school. The words felt like a foreign language, and she could feel her confidence waver. What if she didn't understand enough to contribute? What if they realized she wasn't as good as they thought? Suddenly, Raj spoke up. Jada, you seem quiet. Do you have any ideas? You must have some insights. Don't just sit there. His bluntness caught her off guard, and for a moment, Jada froze. Her mind raced, but she had nothing to offer. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She wanted to contribute, but how could she when she felt so out of her depth? Ethan, sensing the tension, stepped in. Raj, relax. Let's give her a minute. We're all here to work together. Jada appreciated Ethan's intervention, but the weight of Raj's expectations still lingered. She turned her attention back to the problem, focusing on the numbers and the patterns they were trying to decipher. Slowly, as she reviewed the calculations, a pattern emerged in her mind, something that hadn't been obvious at first. She couldn't explain why it made sense, but it did. Tentatively, she raised her hand. What if we consider the inverse of the prime numbers in this scenario? Maybe we could work backward from the assumptions and see if they lead us to a different angle. The room fell silent for a moment. Anna looked at her, intrigued. That's actually a great idea. I haven't thought of approaching it that way. Raj, who had been skeptical of her abilities, raised an eyebrow. You might be onto something. Let's test it. Jada's heart skipped a beat as the team began working through her suggestion. For the first time since she had arrived, she felt like she truly belonged in this room. The feeling of contributing, of being heard, was something she hadn't expected so soon, but it fueled her determination. She could do this. She didn't have to be perfect, but she was capable. As the day wore on, Jada began to settle into the rhythm of the program. It wasn't easy, there were moments of self-doubt and frustration when the problems seemed insurmountable. But with each small victory, she grew more confident in her abilities. She realized that this wasn't just about impressing others or living up to their expectations. It was about learning and growing, about pushing through the discomfort to find solutions. When the day ended, Jada left the room with her mind buzzing. She had made it through the first day, and she had survived, thrived, despite the anxiety and pressure. She wasn't the same girl who had walked into that room earlier. She had proven to herself that she was capable of more than she had imagined. As she returned to her dorm, she felt a sense of pride swell inside her. She wasn't sure where this journey would lead, but for the first time, she felt like she was on the right path. The first week of the math research program flew by in a whirlwind. Jada found herself immersed in a constant cycle of lectures, team meetings, and problem-solving sessions. She had moments of triumph, like the day she proposed a novel approach to a difficult problem that the team had been struggling with for hours. There were also moments of self-doubt when she felt overwhelmed by the sheer brilliance of the students around her. By the end of the week, the exhaustion had begun to set in. The work was mentally draining, and every day felt like a test of her endurance. It wasn't just about solving equations or understanding complex theories. It was about keeping up with her peers, pushing herself to think at a higher level, and constantly proving to herself that she belonged in this space. One particular afternoon, after a lecture on number theory, Jada found herself sitting alone in the campus courtyard, her mind spinning. She had always loved math, but the pressure of being in such a competitive environment was starting to weigh on her. The other students seemed to absorb the material effortlessly, while she was still working hard just to keep up. Am I really cut out for this? She wondered, staring at the pages of notes in front of her. What if I'm not as good as I thought I was? Hey, Jada. Jada looked up to find Anna standing in front of her, a concerned look on her face. Anna had become one of the few people Jada felt comfortable with in the program. Despite her natural confidence, Anna had a quiet way of offering support without making Jada feel like she was struggling. What's up? Anna asked, taking a seat beside her. Jada hesitated before answering. I don't know. I feel like everyone else is so much better than me. I'm just trying to keep up, but it's hard. Anna nodded, her expression understanding. I get it. This whole thing can feel like a pressure cooker sometimes. But I've been watching you, Jada. You're way stronger than you think. Jada frowned. I don't know. I keep thinking I'm going to mess up or fall behind. What if I'm just not good enough? Anna sighed softly. Listen, Jada, the whole point of this program is to push ourselves. You're supposed to feel challenged, it's normal. But you're here because you've got something special. You have a perspective that's different from everyone else's. And that's exactly why you belong here. Jada felt a warmth spread through her at Anna's words. It wasn't the first time someone had said something like this, but hearing it from Anna, who had been in the program longer, made it feel more real. I just don't want to fail, Jada said quietly. Anna smiled, her eyes full of encouragement. Failure's part of the process. Trust me. I've made mistakes, too. We all have. But it's about learning from them, not letting them stop you. You're here because you've earned it. So don't let self-doubt take that away from you. The next day, Jada woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. Anna's words echoed in her mind as she prepared for another day of lectures and group work. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was beginning to understand that it wasn't supposed to be easy. The challenge was what made it worthwhile. As the week progressed, Jada pushed herself harder. She started to speak up more during group discussions, contributing her ideas with increasing confidence. She found herself diving into problems that once seemed insurmountable, determined to find a way through. There were still moments of doubt, still times when she felt like she wasn't keeping up, but she was learning how to push through them. Then, on the third week of the program, the teams were assigned their first major project, a detailed research paper on an unsolved mathematical conjecture. Jada's group was tasked with studying the Riemann hypothesis, one of the most famous unsolved problems in mathematics. It was a daunting task. The conjecture had been the subject of intense study for over a century, and Jada felt the weight of it pressing down on her shoulders. Her group met the next day to discuss their approach. As always, Anna took the lead, outlining their plan to break the problem down into smaller, manageable pieces. But Raj, who had been a skeptic since the first day, raised his concerns almost immediately. This conjecture is too difficult. We need to be realistic here, Raj said, his voice sharp. We're not going to crack something this complicated in a few weeks. Maybe we should focus on something more achievable. Jada felt her chest tighten. She had already doubted herself enough, and hearing Raj's dismissive tone only amplified those feelings. She glanced around at the others, wondering if they felt the same way. But before she could say anything, Anna spoke up. We're here to tackle big problems, Raj. It's not about achieving everything at once, it's about taking what we can from the experience and learning along the way. If we get stuck, we'll pivot. But I'm not backing down from this. The tension in the room was palpable, but Anna's confidence seemed to settle everyone down. Even Raj didn't argue. Jada felt a surge of admiration for Anna. It wasn't just about solving the problem, it was about maintaining the belief that they could work through it, even if it seemed impossible. It was a mindset she hadn't considered before, but now, it felt like a key to unlocking her own potential. The following days were filled with long hours of research, calculations, and discussions. The problem was every bit as complicated as Jada had feared. At times, it felt like they were getting nowhere, but with each setback came a new breakthrough, no matter how small. Jada began to appreciate the process of working through the problem, even if the solution wasn't clear. The experience was shaping her, teaching her that perseverance was just as important as intelligence. One evening, as the group gathered in their dorm room to discuss their progress, Jada found herself standing in front of a whiteboard, staring at a series of equations. She had been working on one particular part of the Riemann hypothesis for hours, trying to find a pattern that might lead to a breakthrough. This is it, Jada thought, her eyes scanning the board for any hint of a solution. Her mind felt like it was on the verge of something. Without thinking, she picked up a marker and began to scribble down a new approach. It wasn't fully formed, but there was something about it that felt right. Slowly, her group gathered around her, looking over her shoulder at the board. "Wait a minute," Ethan said, his voice filled with excitement. "This is it. I think you've cracked it. You found the connection." Jada's heart raced as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. For the first time, she felt like she was truly contributing, not just keeping up, but leading the way. The breakthrough wasn't the final answer to the conjecture, but it was a step closer than they had been before. "I think we've got something," Jada said, her voice steady. "Let's test it out." As the group worked together to explore her approach, Jada felt a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. The struggle, the doubts, the long hours, they were all worth it. And as she looked at her teammates, she realized something important. "I'm not just here to prove I belong. I'm here to learn, to grow, and to help others do the same." The days blurred into one another as the math research program continued. With each passing day, Jada found herself more absorbed in the work, growing more confident in her ability to contribute meaningfully. The progress they were making on the Riemann hypothesis was slow but steady, and the more Jada learned, the more she began to believe in herself. Still, there was something unsettling about the entire experience. Despite the support of her teammates, the work was relentless. The pressure was constant, and the expectation to achieve something extraordinary weighed on her shoulders. It was the beginning of the fourth week when Jada first felt it, a deep, gnawing exhaustion that crept into her bones and clouded her thoughts. The problem they were working on was daunting, and with every new layer they peeled back, there were more questions than answers. Even her breakthroughs, like the one from the week before, felt fleeting, like they had only scratched the surface of something far more complicated than she had ever imagined. The atmosphere in their group had changed too. Tensions were beginning to surface, especially with Raj, who had been increasingly critical of their progress. He wasn't one to express doubt openly, but his sharp remarks and pointed suggestions were starting to wear on Jada. Every time she presented an idea, Raj was quick to dismiss it, offering little more than a curt, "That's not going to work." She could feel the others starting to lose faith as well, their enthusiasm ebbing away as the work grew more taxing. They were all tired. The breakthrough they had once hoped for now felt further out of reach than ever. Jada sat in their small study room one evening, staring at her notebook. The words blurred in front of her eyes as the weight of the problem became almost unbearable. The room was silent, save for the sound of Raj pacing back and forth. He'd been at it for hours, barely acknowledging anyone else in the room. "I just don't get it," Jada whispered to herself, running her hand through her hair in frustration. "What if we're all wasting our time? What if I'm not as good as I think I am?" But before she could dwell on her thoughts any longer, Anna stepped into the room. She had been quiet for the past few hours, quietly listening to Raj's criticisms. But now, her eyes were steely, her posture confident. She looked at Jada, then to the rest of the group. "Okay, that's enough," Anna said firmly. "Raj, you need to calm down. We're all working hard here. Everyone is doing their best." Raj stopped pacing, his face tight with frustration. "We've been stuck on this for too long. We're not getting anywhere. I'm just saying what we're all thinking." Anna shook her head. "No, you're not. Jada, Ethan, and I, none of us are giving up. But you're not helping, Raj. You're only making this harder." Jada looked at Anna, surprised by her outburst. Anna, who had always been calm and measured, was finally standing up to Raj. It was a side of Anna Jada hadn't seen before. "I agree with Anna," Ethan said quietly from the corner of the room. "We've all been putting in a lot of work, but we're not going to throw in the towel just because it's hard. That's not why we're here." The silence that followed hung heavy in the room. Raj's eyes darted from one person to the next, and for a moment, Jada wasn't sure how the situation would unfold. Would Raj snap back? Would he concede? Tension was thick in the air, and Jada could feel the weight of everyone's emotions. Exhaustion, frustration, and an unspoken fear that the work was never going to come together. Then, finally, Raj sighed, slumping into a chair. "Fine," he muttered. "I just don't get it. This is harder than anything I've worked on before. And it feels like we're not getting anywhere." Jada, who had been sitting silently, suddenly found the words she needed. "We might not have all the answers yet," she said softly, her voice more confident than she felt. "But we've come so far already. We can't just give up now. We're not just solving problems, we're learning how to face challenges. And that's what makes this worth it. All of this, it's just part of the process." Her words seemed to resonate with the group. Raj, though still frustrated, seemed to accept the reality of their situation. The air in the room shifted, just slightly. It wasn't all smooth sailing after that, but for the first time in days, there was a sense of unity. They were still a team. As the week wore on, Jada's fatigue continued to mount. The days blended together in a haze of equations, proofs, and sleepless nights. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, she found herself alone in her dorm room, her back against the wall, staring at the ceiling. She felt drained, physically and emotionally. Her confidence was slipping again, and she couldn't help but wonder if Anna's optimism had been misplaced. What if they really couldn't solve the problem? What if all their work had been in vain? Am I just not cut out for this? She thought, her mind heavy with doubt. Maybe this was too much to ask of me. But then she remembered something Anna had said to her early on in the program: failure is part of the process. She had always known that failure was a part of learning, but this was different. This felt like a breaking point, a test of her very spirit. The next morning, Jada went for a walk around the campus. The sun was just beginning to rise, and the world felt still, quiet in a way that allowed her to think clearly for the first time in days. She stopped by a small fountain near the center of the campus, the sound of the water calming her mind. As she watched the ripples form in the water, she realized something important. This wasn't just about proving she was capable. It was about proving that she could keep going, even when it felt impossible. The challenge wasn't to solve the Riemann hypothesis in a few weeks. The challenge was to persevere through the frustration, to learn from every setback, and to grow from every failure. "I can't give up," Jada thought, a renewed sense of purpose filling her heart. "I won't." The next day, Jada returned to the study room with a new determination. She wasn't going to let the pressure break her. She wasn't going to let Raja's doubts or her own fears hold her back. The work would be hard, yes. It would test her in ways she never imagined. But she was stronger now. And that, more than anything, was the key to overcoming the hurdles that lay ahead. As she sat down with her team, ready to tackle the next set of problems, she knew one thing for certain: they weren't just solving a mathematical problem. They were solving something much bigger, the problem of learning how to keep moving forward, no matter what. The following week felt different for Jada. The exhaustion that had plagued her for so long seemed to have lifted slightly, though it wasn't gone completely. Her mind, however, had shifted. She was no longer trying to keep up with everyone else, she was learning how to embrace the process, with all its uncertainties and obstacles. The work was still difficult, but something inside her had changed. The doubts that once consumed her thoughts were now quieter, more distant. In their place was a quiet but firm resolve. It was early Thursday morning when the group received an unexpected challenge. The program coordinator, Dr. Matthews, gathered all the students in the auditorium for an announcement. "We've been keeping something under wraps for a while," Dr. Matthews said, her voice steady and authoritative. "But it's time you all know the truth. At the end of this program, the most promising research team will present their findings at a prestigious mathematics conference. This isn't just an academic achievement. This is a career-making opportunity." The room buzzed with excitement. Whispers of disbelief filled the space as everyone digested the weight of Dr. Matthews' words. Jada could feel her heart racing in her chest. It wasn't just about the Riemann hypothesis anymore. The stakes had been raised. They were no longer just working on a problem, they were competing for something much larger, something that could change their lives. Dr. Matthews continued, her eyes scanning the room. "I want each of you to understand one thing: this isn't just about solving a problem. This is about presenting yourself, your work, and your ideas to the world. I'm pushing you all to think bigger. Think outside the box." The conference judges will be looking not only for brilliance, but for innovation. For the next great idea in mathematics. And only one team will be selected. The pressure was palpable. Jada felt a pit in her stomach as the reality of the competition set in. The group had made significant strides with their work on the Riemann hypothesis, but now it was clear that what they presented had to be revolutionary. The sense of urgency grew immediately. Later that afternoon, as Jada sat in the study room with her team, the weight of the announcement still hung heavy in the air. The space was charged with an undercurrent of energy, a mix of excitement and tension. Anna, as always, was the first to speak. "We need to raise the bar," she said, her voice confident. "We've made great progress, but we're going to have to go beyond what we thought was possible if we want to stand out." Jada could sense the excitement in Anna's words, but there was also something deeper, an edge of seriousness that wasn't there before. They were no longer just working to learn. Now, they had a goal to meet, and it was bigger than any of them had anticipated. Raj, who had been quieter than usual lately, finally spoke up. "We need to bring something new to the table. If we don't come up with something original, we'll just be another group tackling the same old problem. We need to push the boundaries of what we know." Jada nodded, taking in the challenge. The work they had been doing was already complicated, but now they had to do more than just solve equations, they needed to show the world something new. She felt a mix of determination and fear. Could they do it? Could they really find something that no one else had seen before? Ethan looked over at Jada. "We've been doing well so far, Jada. You've been a big part of the breakthroughs we've had. I think you're onto something with the work you've been doing on the hypothesis. You can help lead us to the next level." Jada felt a surge of gratitude at his words. They had all been struggling with their doubts, but here was Ethan, reaffirming her importance in the team. For a brief moment, the weight of their task felt lighter. She was part of something bigger. She wasn't just a bystander in this project. She was an integral part of the team's progress. But then, as she looked at the board covered with mathematical notations, her thoughts returned to the enormity of what lay ahead. She had to find a breakthrough, something original. It wasn't just a matter of solving the Riemann hypothesis anymore. It was about uncovering something that hadn't been seen before, something the mathematical world had overlooked. As the days passed, Jada threw herself into the work with an intensity she hadn't known she was capable of. Every free moment was spent reviewing research, brainstorming new approaches, and discussing their findings with the group. The more she thought about the problem, the more she realized something: they weren't just solving a mathematical puzzle. They were engaged in an intellectual adventure, one that required creativity, persistence, and the ability to see things from new angles. On Monday afternoon, as the group met to review their progress, Jada suddenly saw something in the equations they had been working on. She wasn't sure what it was at first, but there was a strange feeling that told her she was onto something. She began scribbling down a series of numbers, drawing connections between the factors in a way that hadn't occurred to her before. "Wait a second," Jada muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think I've found something." The group crowded around her, peering over her shoulder as she worked. She explained her thinking step by step, showing them how the new connections between the numbers might lead to a breakthrough in their understanding of the Riemann hypothesis. The group watched in stunned silence as Jada presented her work. This is huge," Anna said, her voice filled with excitement. "This could be it. This could be the insight we've been looking for." Raj, who had been skeptical of Jada's ideas in the past, leaned in closer. "I didn't think we'd get this far. But you might be onto something here." Jada felt a wave of relief and pride wash over her. She had done it. She had contributed something original. The breakthrough wasn't complete yet, but it was the first step in a new direction, one that could set their work apart from everyone else's. For the first time since the program had begun, Jada felt a deep sense of pride in her abilities. She wasn't just some student struggling to keep up. She was a mathematician in her own right, someone who could make a difference in the world of math. The next few days were a blur as the group worked feverishly to refine their findings. Jada spent hours rewriting parts of their research, testing out new calculations, and ensuring that their work was as polished as it could be. Every piece of the puzzle seemed to fall into place, one by one. The conference was drawing closer, and Jada could feel the tension rising again. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was excitement, anticipation. They had something to present. They had something new. As the team gathered for their final review before submission, Anna turned to Jada, her eyes filled with pride. "You did it, Jada. This is your work." Jada smiled, her heart swelling with a quiet pride. "We all did it. We're a team." As they submitted their research, Jada couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. She had entered this program as a girl unsure of herself, doubting whether she belonged in such an elite environment. But now, she had found her voice, her confidence, and a deep appreciation for the journey. Whatever happened next, Jada knew she had already achieved something incredible. The days before the conference felt like a whirlwind, a blur of activity, anticipation, and nervous energy. The math research team had worked tirelessly on their project, poring over equations, refining proofs, and ensuring that their work was not only correct but also groundbreaking. With every revision, Jada felt more confident that their research was something special. Something that could make a lasting impact on the field. But as the deadline loomed closer, the pressure intensified. Jada's thoughts were consumed by the work, but there was something else lingering in her mind, the looming presentation at the conference. The idea of standing in front of a room full of esteemed mathematicians, presenting her work to the world, filled her with a mix of excitement and dread. She had always been more comfortable working behind the scenes, away from the spotlight. But this was different. This wasn't just about solving a problem. It was about showing the world that she, too, could contribute something meaningful. As the team gathered in the study room for their final preparation before they left for the conference, Jada couldn't help but feel a knot form in her stomach. The room buzzed with nervous energy, each team member focused on their task, reviewing their notes and practicing their parts of the presentation. But Jada couldn't focus. Her thoughts kept drifting to the thought of standing on that stage, in front of hundreds of people, and speaking about their research. Anna, who had been calm and steady throughout the entire process, noticed Jada's anxious demeanor. She walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Hey," she said softly. "You're ready for this." "We all are." Jada forced a smile, though her nerves were still palpable. "I'm not sure. What if I mess up? What if I can't explain everything the way it's supposed to be? What if they don't think our work is good enough?" Anna's eyes were kind, but there was a firmness in her voice. "We've already done the hard part. We've created something original, something valuable. That's what matters. This presentation, it's just the final step. And you've been amazing through all of this. Don't forget that." Jada felt a warmth spread through her at Anna's words. She was right. The work they had done, the long nights, the struggles, the doubts, had brought them to this point. The research was solid. The breakthrough they had made could change everything. And now, all they had to do was share it with the world. She had been doubting herself for so long, but maybe, just maybe, she was ready for this. The night before the conference, Jada sat in her dorm room, staring at the presentation slides. She had reviewed them countless times, but now that the moment was finally here, the enormity of the situation felt overwhelming. Her hands trembled slightly as she clicked through each slide, reviewing the data, the graphs, the calculations that had been so carefully crafted over the last few weeks. The door to her room creaked open, and Ethan stepped in, his expression calm, though there was a glimmer of nervousness in his eyes. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice soft. Jada nodded, gesturing for him to sit. "I can't stop thinking about tomorrow. What if we're not ready? What if we've missed something important?" Ethan leaned back in the chair, a thoughtful look crossing his face. "Jada, you've been the one pushing this whole project forward. I can't count the number of times I've watched you come up with new ideas and breakthroughs when we needed them most. You've got this. We've all got this." Jada smiled, though the nerves didn't subside completely. "But what if we mess up? This is big. If we mess up, we could lose everything." Ethan shook his head. "You've already done the hard work. And remember, we're in this together. Whatever happens, we've done something no one else has done. That's something to be proud of." Jada looked at him, her heart swelling with appreciation. "Thanks, Ethan. I needed to hear that." "Anytime," he said with a grin. "Now, how about we go over the presentation one more time? Just to make sure we're all set." And so, for the next hour, they went through the presentation again, refining their talking points and ensuring that everything was in place. By the time they were done, the nervous tension in Jada's chest had dissipated somewhat. She still felt a flutter of anxiety, but it was no longer overpowering. Instead, she felt ready. They had worked so hard for this moment, and it was time to share their discoveries with the world. The next day, the team arrived at the conference early, their nerves heightened by the anticipation in the air. The hotel ballroom where the presentations were to take place was grand, filled with mathematicians, professors, and researchers from all over the world. The room hummed with the sound of excited conversation, the low murmur of people discussing the latest developments in the field. The stage at the front of the room loomed large, with a projector screen and a podium waiting for the speakers. Jada's heart pounded in her chest as she took a seat in the front row with the rest of her team. The weight of the moment settled in, and she could feel her palms growing clammy. There was no turning back now. They were about to present their work to the best and brightest minds in the field. But then, as the first few presentations began, something unexpected happened. The fear, the anxiety that had been consuming Jada slowly began to fade. She watched the other teams present their findings, some with confidence, others with a hint of nervousness. And as she listened, she realized something important: they were all just people. People with doubts, people with fears. Just like her. And yet, they were all here, doing something incredible. Her mind shifted. This wasn't about impressing anyone. This was about sharing something important, something groundbreaking. This was about doing what they had worked so hard to do, no matter how difficult or intimidating it seemed. When it was finally their turn, Jada felt a calmness settle over her. She stood alongside Anna, Raj, and Ethan, as they walked up to the podium. As they set up their slides, Jada's thoughts raced once more, but this time, instead of fear, she felt something else, determination. They began the presentation, Anna speaking first, explaining the background of their work and the problem they had set out to solve. Jada followed, explaining their breakthrough, detailing the connections she had made, the new insights they had uncovered. With every word, she felt more at ease. She wasn't just talking to the room full of strangers. She was sharing her passion for mathematics, her love for the work, and her pride in the team's achievements. And as they concluded their presentation, the room fell silent for a moment. Then, one by one, the mathematicians in the audience began to clap. The feeling that washed over Jada was indescribable. It wasn't just the relief of completing the presentation. It was the recognition of their hard work, the validation of everything they had accomplished together. She had done it. They had done it. As the team left the stage, Jada found herself smiling. For the first time, she realized that the journey had been about more than just solving an equation. It had been about discovering who she was, about finding strength in herself and in the people around her. She had faced her fears, overcome her doubts, and contributed something meaningful to the world of mathematics. Whatever the judges decided, this moment was a victory in itself. The judges' decision felt like it had taken forever. The conference room buzzed with quiet conversations, filled with a mixture of excitement, apprehension, and anticipation. Jada's fingers drummed nervously on the table in front of her as she sat with Anna, Raj, and Ethan, each of them sharing the same mix of emotions. Their presentation had gone well, but would it be enough? The stakes were high, and every team in the room had brought their A game. Jada glanced around the room, noting the sea of anxious faces, many of which were just as uncertain as hers. But despite the nervous tension, something had shifted within her. A quiet sense of accomplishment settled over her. No matter what the judges decided, they had done something extraordinary. They had taken on the Riemann hypothesis, one of the most famous unsolved problems in mathematics, and made real progress. They had contributed something meaningful to the field. A sudden hush fell over the room as the conference organizers took the stage. Dr. Matthews, who had been with them every step of the way throughout the program, stood at the podium, her expression grave but encouraging. The announcement was imminent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Matthews began, her voice echoing in the large room, "it is my pleasure to announce the winner of this year's mathematics research competition. After careful deliberation and review, the team selected to present their findings at the upcoming International Mathematical Symposium, as well as receive the grand prize, is." Jada's breath caught in her throat. She could barely hear Dr. Matthews' voice over the pounding of her own heart. The silence in the room was almost unbearable. She glanced at her teammates, their eyes wide with hope. The team from the University of Chicago, Jada Williams and her team. The room erupted into applause. Jada's world seemed to stop for a moment as the realization washed over her. They had won. The work, the late nights, the sacrifices, everything had led to this moment. She was standing at the center of something monumental, something that could change the course of her future. She turned to Anna, Raj, and Ethan, all of them stunned but grinning ear to ear. Anna wrapped her arms around Jada in a tight hug, whispering, "You did it, Jada. We did it." Jada could hardly believe it. Her hands were trembling, her heart racing. She had stepped into this program unsure of herself, afraid that she wasn't capable of achieving something so grand. But now, standing here, she realized that everything had changed. She wasn't just a student anymore. She was a part of something bigger, a force that could make a difference. The following moments were a blur. The team was called up to the stage to accept their award, a large glass trophy symbolizing their achievement. They stood together, beaming with pride, as the audience applauded. It was a dream come true, but it wasn't just about the trophy or the recognition. It was about the journey, the people, and the knowledge that they had accomplished something truly unique. After the ceremony, as the excitement of the win began to sink in, Jada found herself alone in a quiet corner of the conference hall. She needed a moment to process everything that had happened. It was as if all the tension, the doubts, and the fears that had once filled her were now replaced with a deep sense of fulfillment. As she stood by the window, looking out at the city skyline, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find Dr. Matthews standing behind her, her expression soft with a knowing smile. "You've come a long way, Jada," Dr. Matthews said, her voice warm. "I remember the first time I saw you in class, quiet, unsure. But look at you now. You've grown so much, not just as a mathematician, but as a person." Jada smiled, her heart full. "I didn't think I could do it. I wasn't sure I belonged here." "You belong, Jada," Dr. Matthews said firmly. "You've proven that. This is just the beginning for you." The words hit Jada harder than she expected. She had come to the program feeling like an outsider, like someone who wasn't meant to be among the brilliant minds surrounding her. But now, she felt like she was a part of that world. She wasn't an imposter. She wasn't just a student anymore. She had earned her place here. "Thank you," Jada whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for believing in me." Dr. Matthews gave her a gentle smile and patted her shoulder. "You're the one who did the hard work. Just remember, this is only the beginning. Keep pushing, keep learning, and never stop believing in yourself." Later that evening, the team gathered to celebrate their victory. They went to a small local restaurant to unwind, laughing and reminiscing about the challenges they had faced together. The weight of the competition was behind them now, but the feeling of success lingered. As Jada looked around at her friends, Anna, Raj, Ethan, she realized how far they had all come. What had started as a challenge, a fear, was now a story of triumph. They had each played an integral part in this journey, and together, they had made history. "I still can't believe it," Raj said, shaking his head in disbelief as he clinked his glass with theirs. "We did it. We actually did it. I think we all deserve this," Anna said, raising her glass. "To hard work, friendship, and taking risks." Jada couldn't agree more. She felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the people around her, the team that had supported her, pushed her, and believed in her. She hadn't come to this program expecting to find herself. But here, in this moment, she realized that she had found more than just success in mathematics. She had found confidence. She had found her voice. She had found her purpose. As the night wore on and they all headed back to their hotel rooms, Jada felt a sense of peace settle over her. The future was still uncertain, but it didn't matter. She had learned something important: life was about more than just the end goal. It was about the journey, the ups and downs, the people you met along the way, the lessons you learned, and the person you became. Looking back at her journey, Jada realized that she hadn't just overcome her fears about mathematics or the competition. She had overcome her doubts about herself. She had learned to believe in her own abilities, and that, she knew, would carry her further than any mathematical theorem ever could. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Jada smiled. Tomorrow was another day, another opportunity to learn, to grow, and to challenge herself. And whatever came next, she knew she was ready. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?